Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone. Welcome. This is Digital Transformation Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. We are here today discussing the topic of changing your digital transformation narrative from cost to value creation. Now, changing the digital transformation narrative from cost to value creation is important for several reasons. The first one is strategic focus. Shifting the narrative to value helps organizations move away from a purely cost-cutting mindset. Instead, it encourages a strategic focus on how technology can be delivered to create new opportunities, enhance customer experience, and drive innovation. And all of this leads to competitive advantage. And in our rapidly changing business landscape, organizations need to differentiate themselves from competitors. Emphasizing value creation through digital transformation allows companies to position themselves as innovators and leaders in their industry, gaining competitive advantage. But gaining real benefit, and as we've discussed on this show recently, requires a customer-centric approach. And value creation often involves understanding and meeting customer needs more effectively by aligning digital transformation efforts with customer experience. But listen, don't forget about employee experience and engagement. Employees are more likely to be motivated and engaged when they understand how their work contributes to creating value for the organization as a whole. This can boost morale and encourage a sense of purpose among employees, and this can lead to improved organizational performance. There are many other aspects to consider as well. Focusing on value creation fosters an innovation-driven culture. It encourages experimentation and the ability to adapt to changing conditions, making the business more agile and responsive. All of this adds up to better long-term sustainability, ensuring that the business remains relevant and resilient in the face of evolving market dynamics. And of course, this leads to stakeholder satisfaction among shareholders, investors, and executives. So changing the narrative from cost to value creation is crucial for organizations to really move the needle with digital transformation. But how do you do it? Well, that's what we'll be discussing today with a great panel of guests, articulating the risks, costs, and benefits, gaining buy-in for a strategy which delivers a competitive advantage, and conveying the impacts and risks of your strategy. So it should be another great discussion today on Digital Transformation Talk. But as always, before I introduce our guests, I do want to say that we want to hear from you too. We'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So please join us with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way, jump on in. I will attempt to get some of your questions and comments into the flow of the show today. And we'll have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right. Let's bring aboard our guests today, starting with Tim Bottke. Tim is Chief Innovation Officer at Deloitte and the author of the book, Digital Transformation Payday. Tim, welcome aboard. Tim advises clients in strategy and transformation topics across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. As I mentioned, he's also the author of the book, Digital Transformation Payday. But a fun fact about Tim, as a former Happy Pascal programming fan in his early days, Tim had to dust off his programming skills for his recent research and was extremely grateful that Python forgives almost everything. Well, all right. How is that going for you, Tim?
Hi, great to be back, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Very good. It's great to see you again, Tim. Thank you for being with us. Welcome aboard. Also with us today is Diana Kearns-Manolatos. Diana is a technology transformation research leader at Detroit. Diana, welcome aboard. You are the transformation research leader within Detroit Center for Integrated Research. Diana explores many topics at the intersection of transformation, innovation, business strategy, and digital value. A fun fact about Diana, though, that you were actually named after Diana, Prince of Wales, in admiration for her global humanitarian work. That's fantastic, Diana. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty good benchmark to live up to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully I can do the name justice.
I'm sure you will. Thank you for being here, Diana. And also joining us today is Steve Rennie. Steve is Director of Data-Driven Technologies for the Government of Canada. Steve, welcome aboard. Steve leads the responsible development of AI and other emerging technologies at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. But a fun fact about Steve is he's also currently writing and editing a book about baseball in Ottawa, which is set to be published next year. Congratulations, Steve. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating look at an often overlooked part of the country, and certainly a part of North America when it comes to baseball.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really exciting to be working on that.
That's
Sort
right.
of a fun diversion from my day job.
Yes, I'll be looking forward to that. Fantastic. All right. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to get us started by drawing our attention to an article published by Forbes recently with the title, "To lead digital and AI first transformation, CIOs must think like CMOs." The author, Brian Solis, talks about the idea that in order to transform the enterprise, IT needs to rebrand itself as an innovation and growth engine. IT is often viewed as a cost center, but with the mandate to leverage generative AI and other related technology, technology leaders are closer to innovation than anyone can imagine. So Solis warns us that generative AI isn't just another technology to incorporate into the tech stack. It is the next generation of business, and as a result, the role of IT is moving forward. To move forward must now be a co-creator in digital transformation that powers business transformation. It's an interesting article. My question to the group is, do you agree with Solis here? Do you agree that CIOs must change their mindset and think more like CMOs? And if so, what is one way that leaders need to change and why? Tim, I'd like to start with you. What are your thoughts on the article?
Actually, I was smiling when reading the article because these days, every CXO is supposed to be a different CXO, you know? We tell the CMOs that they should become like CFOs. We tell the CIOs they should become CMOs. And my key point in management discussions on digital transformation usually is, look, if you act as a team and understand all the capabilities you have in a firm, that's where the success will happen. So you do not need to pretend to be someone else. You need to capture all the capabilities in the team to make sure that whatever you have in the technology space is really creating value. It's helping your strategy, and it helps you to be a sustainable success in the market. And that's the funny part of the equation. So I've told CMOs you need to understand technology. We tell CIOs you need to understand marketing, and in the end, the team is where it all happens. That's my view.
Interesting. Yeah, the team is where it happens. I mean, people forget that, or leaders sometimes forget that innovation happens in the hallways and the cubicles of organizations. Diana, if I'm remembering correctly, you are a former CIO. What is your opinion about the article? Is it fair that we expect innovation to be delivered by leadership? Isn't innovation really found with the people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a former CMO, and given that I look at what CIOs are doing today, I think that there is this interesting nexus point between those two functions. And, you know, when I was a CMO, it was really about thinking about the strategic growth and innovation trajectory for the business. And there's a lot that CIOs can gain from doing that. But like Tim was saying, all of these functions need to be working together collaboratively. So I think it really is wherever the strategic force is for your organization. And that should be the board, the CEO, and the C-suite collectively understanding what the strategy and the growth engine is meant to be, and all of those functions working toward that. And just
Steve,
to pick a specific line, sorry, from the article, I loved the line about asking different and better questions. And I think that that really gets to the heart of what strategy is supposed to be about, as well as, you know, the research that we do in Deloitte's Center for Integrated Research. It's about asking good questions to find good answers.
And really, everyone in the C-suite must be doing that today, asking different questions, better questions, more questions. It's not just CIOs, it's not just CMOs, it's CEOs and CISOs and the rest. Steve, you are an IT leader for the government of Canada, doing some rather innovative things with AI. What's your opinion about the article?
Well, I won't kind of go over the points that Tim and Diana made because I think they're very good ones about the need for collaboration and the responsibility not just being something that IT leaders need to shoulder, but also it needs to flow up from staff as well. Because I don't think that we can just kind of put all that on leaders. I think it really has to be coming from the ground. I think that maybe the idea of this cost center mentality misses the bigger picture. I think that IT investments are inherently strategic investments. They create the value and they empower innovation right across the organization. And I think that the missing piece often is communication. I think that as IT leaders, we do need to be better storytellers. I think we need to focus on the business outcomes of our work and how it delivers value to the organization, and then just really do a better job of articulating that value proposition of our work. And I think if we do a better job of framing our work as strategic and while partnering and working across the organization, we'll have a lot more success than if we try to sort of go it alone or in silos.
Well, it is an interesting article for folks attending today. If you'd like to take a look at that article, it is here in the chat section from Forbes by Brian Solis. To lead digital and AI first transformation, CIOs must think like CMOs. Interesting discussion. We are here to talk about turning digital transformation mindsets and the conversation from one of cost to value creation. So I want to know how we do that, which leads us to our first discussion point today, articulating the risks, costs, and benefits. To me, it all comes down to measurement. Maybe you tell me if I'm wrong, but if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, is the old adage. So my question to the group is, how can we measure the risks, the costs, and the benefits and communicate those? Diana, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So I think, as you said, it is about measurement here. We know from our research that digital transformation is the single most important investment now and into the future that organizations can be making to drive enterprise value. Full stop. Our survey data, we looked at 1,600 global organizations, and 68% of organizations agree with that concept. But they also said that they are struggling to measure that value. 73% cited the inability to define metrics as their top challenge to really understanding what the value is. So organizations are at a crossroads. It's not really up for debate that there's strategic value from investing in technology, but organizations really don't know how to measure it. And there are barriers that are standing in the way of that. There are things like, defining those impact metrics, organizational silos, the inability to collect data across the business, lack of clear ownership within the C-suite and leadership of who's really responsible for tracking that. And one of the big things that we found in our research is just an overall inconsistency in value measures. And so that's something that, through the research as well, we've been hoping to try to address by putting forward, more consistency around measurement. Because just to give an example, if you have an AI investment and you're using one set of measures as a CIO and giving that to your CFO, but then for a cloud investment, you're using a completely different set of measures, that inconsistency makes it really difficult to assess the value of one technology investment versus another. And it goes back to that storytelling element of how can you more consistently do that?
Well, it's an interesting point, Diana, and we have talked about this on the show here, where estimates of the failure rate for digital transformation can be as high as 70% or higher. And one of the reasons given for that or indicated for that is a difficulty in really measuring the transformation in ways that matter. Now, Steve, you are responsible for the development and use of AI for large sections of the government of Canada. What are the measures that you use, and how does that work for you?
Well, I think it really has to go back to defining what needs you have as an organization. Sort of be tech agnostic for a second, and just figure out, okay, if you're going to use artificial intelligence, that's great, but is it really the best and most appropriate tool for the thing that you're trying to do? So in our case, before we undertake any sort of artificial intelligence project, one of the key things that we like to do is sort of focus on what the overall objective of the project might be and what sort of value we'll derive from it. And then determine what sort of the tech stack behind that looks like. So don't go in presupposing that artificial intelligence will naturally be the solution that you go for, because often it's sort of a costly and longer term investment, and there may be simpler and more efficient ways to do that. So that's one. But then I think, once you've determined that artificial intelligence may be the route that you'd like to pursue, it's really looking at a few different factors. So one, is it improving efficiency? Is it, streamlining processes, that sort of thing? That's certainly important. But then you can also measure other aspects of it. So one thing that we're trying to do is to measure things like the carbon footprint of our AI systems to see if that, if we're able to reduce that footprint over time. And then report back on that, demonstrating value in a bit of a different way, but I think a significant and important way. So I think that, you have to look at, that's just one example. There are many others, but I think, you need to look at it from, not just the value that you're driving for the organization, but also those ancillary values that I mentioned right there.
And Tim, in addition to being Chief Innovation Officer at Deloitte, as I mentioned, you are also the author of the book Digital Transformation Payday. We've talked about this in the past. Do you have any suggestions from your book that might apply to how we can apply measurements to digital transformation and demonstrate the success of our efforts?
I think, as Diana has already elaborated, we've built on the book to do this additional research. But I fully see the point that in any way, the measurement needs to help supporting the business goal you want to achieve. And the funny thing is here, what you say in the discussion point, you say, we talk about the risk, cost, and benefit. I actually think it should be the other way around. So number one should be, what is the real business benefit you want to achieve? Then you can talk about which technologies and tools help you to achieve that goal in the market or for the government, for your people. And only then you can talk about costs and the risk associated. Because if you turn the sentiment in the wrong way, it's already suggesting that Brian was right when he said it shouldn't be a cost center. It should be a business value transformation, and then the rest will follow. And that's what also all of our research shows very clearly, that if you're not in a strategy to win, and then based on that you decide what technologies to use and how to transform, then you're probably not going to succeed. And then you also cannot measure it. Then you start measuring what you can measure, which is cost.
Interesting point. And easy one to measure. And risk. I'm curious about risk. I mean, we talk a lot about the benefits or the potential benefits of digital transformation and related technologies and approaches. What are the risks that I should be concerned about? It seems to me the risk is not meeting my objectives for the benefit. That's the big risk, just missing that opportunity. But what are the risks that I should be aware of? How do I measure those risks? And what should I do to ameliorate those risks? I'll put it out to all of you. What are your thoughts about this risk quotient? Anyone?
Well, I think just on the... No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve. No, please.
I think on the risk front, there are a couple of pieces that I want to touch on. So one is the risk that your organization will reject whatever it is you're trying to do. And I think a big part of that is how you communicate what you are trying to do and the reasons behind it. And going back to the point that we made earlier about IT leaders needing to do a better job of communicating effectively the value they're bringing to an organization. At the same time, we need to also do a better job, I think, of communicating why we're doing certain things, and that sort of helps with that risk. There's also the risk of just not doing it. And there's a significant drawback for not going ahead with something that you're working on in the digital transformation space. That is harder to measure, but it's still a risk that is there and needs to be touched on.
All right. Well, this whole communication aspect leads us really to our next discussion point, and that is gaining buy-in for our strategy, buy-in not only from the employees and workers of the organization to adopt the new technologies and the new approaches, but also gaining buy-in from other C-suite leaders and the organization as a whole. look, to me, even the best digital transformation strategies will fail without this sort of support from decision makers and employees. So what are your recommendations? I'll put this out to the group. What are your recommendations to communicate and build that buy-in for innovation? Diana, do you have some suggestions on how we might frame that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think layering in both risk and reward is an important aspect of that. And so one of the framings that we've found has been, through our research, very effective is thinking about 5 value categories, so that you do have that consistency in communicating about the value expectations of a technology investment and then the returns. And so those 5 categories are financial value, customer value, value that you're gaining from processes, value for the workforce, and then purpose-related KPIs. And so within that, those 5 categories, there are going to be areas where you're optimizing existing value that you have, where you're maybe preserving and protecting, and so there's a risk element to that, and where you're creating net new value. And so I think we see through our research that organizations that are more all in on that holistic approach to consistently thinking about value across those 5 categories attribute as much as 20% more of their enterprise value to their investments in digital technologies.
And
so by having a thoughtful approach to measuring or understanding value, you're actually bringing more value as a result.
Exactly. To the point you made earlier, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so, you know, this helps at all points in that life cycle. It can help with building a more effective business case at the outset, so that you're really clearly communicating how that investment in the tech estate is strategically meant to be driving value for that enterprise vision and that corporate or government strategy, so that important investments don't go unfunded or underfunded. It can help then with better and more effectively managing the digital initiative itself, so that you are driving toward that corporate strategy or government strategy. And, you know, when it comes up for refunding, to show that you achieved the objectives of the program. So at every point in the life cycle, it could be helpful.
That's fantastic advice. Thank you, Diana. Tim, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to say, like, all the points Diana made, obviously I fully support, but I believe, and I often see in my client work, that there's another simple test you can make. I have to thank Roger Martin for this test, but very often with clients, when they say how they want to do their digital transformation or their strategy, it's so shallow that you have to do the test that if the opposite of your strategy is nonsense, so is yours. So what does it mean? It's like in any given market, there's always room for at least two competing strategies fighting against each other, but they have to be different. And very often you see that when you want to secure buy-in for a transformation, it says we want to be customer-centric, we want to be lean and efficient, we want to be agile, and all these buzzwords you find all over the place. And just think about what the opposite would mean. We hate our customers, we are slow and not moving, and all these kind of things. And no surprise that your people and the organization and your customers will never buy in to these shallow, empty shells of words as a strategy. So, and that's why what Diana said is very helpful, but that only works when we come back to the point we had before. You need to have a good strategy. If you don't have a good strategy, there should be no surprise that you cannot communicate it in a proper way, and then it's no surprise you will never have buy-in. That's my experience. And very often, think about all the strategies you've seen. It's always the same buzzwords.
I want to ask about employee buy-in. Look, I don't like change. Look, I'm the kind of guy that parks in the same parking spot every day, right? If someone's parked in my spot and I have to park somewhere else, it just upsets me, right? And look, we can have great strategies, great technologies, but if employees resist change, if they find ways to sabotage the effort, if they don't have buy-in, then it'll be nearly impossible to really gain the benefits that we are hoping to gain. And Steve, you've done significant improvements in your environment. How were you able to gain the employee engagement and buy-in that you needed to really be successful?
Well, certainly in the artificial intelligence space, there is a lot of mixed feelings around the technology amongst employees. So, there's the fear that it will replace or remove some jobs or job functions from people. There's the fear that it could have all kinds of different consequences. And so getting employees to understand why we're using artificial intelligence in the way that we're using it is important. And so one of the ways we've done that is really by listening. We made it a point to meet with a range of stakeholders right across our department and other departments to sort of hear what the concerns were and see how we might be able to address those concerns. And really trying to find different pockets that would be affected by the potential use of artificial intelligence. So we've met with a lot of folks in our equity-seeking groups across the department because they're often disproportionately impacted by biases and other issues with data that underpins artificial intelligence, and really trying to listen to what those concerns were, and then making sure that we're designing all of our work with them involved right from the start. So one of the things that we've done is anytime we embark on a new artificial intelligence project from day one, we reach out to these various groups across our department and seek their input and encourage them and invite them to work with us to co-develop the artificial intelligence tool that we're building, so that it's right from the start being built in a way that addresses and mitigates against a lot of these concerns and makes people feel a little more ownership around the solution that we're developing. And then that helps with the buy-in. And then it becomes a bit of a ripple effect where you do one and word spreads, and suddenly you're getting a bit more goodwill as you go. And then as you do more projects and work on more things down the road, that buy-in just continues to ripple across the organization until you're at the point where you face less resistance going forward. But just maybe to really encapsulate too, the other part that is important is just getting that, not just us telling them that we're going to be doing artificial intelligence or any kind of digital transformation project. It's really getting buy-in from employees in these sort of change maker networks where employees are trained and they are working with the technology, and they are the ones sort of at the front lines talking about the benefits and why we're doing this. And that carries a lot more weight than somebody at my level telling an employee that we need to do this for reasons X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, they're bought in because it's kind of their idea, and more likely they see the value in it. What's in it for me, or the value in it for their jobs or their department or themselves as professionals. Tim, I'm curious. Many of my listeners and the people that I talk to at a departmental level say they still struggle. Even with all of this, they're sort of in this zone where they have a department, they have a process or processes they must manage. They want to innovate, but they have difficulty getting the support they need or the funding they need, either from executives or from the IT department, or maybe just an awareness of what they do. What can be done at a departmental level from the ground up or the grassroots effect of innovation? What can departments do to deliver in this way in terms of strategy and competitive advantage?
I think it's a very good question, because not every organization is set up in a way that all these ideas are coming to the right levels and get the right funding, as you said.
Right.
But I think we can also be positive in the sense that I feel that this has changed tremendously over the past few years, for sure. So I hardly see any organization where there are not at least procedures where bottom-up ideas can be submitted and they are then evaluated and funded if they benefit the overall organization. I hardly see any organization where ideas cannot be implemented already on department level. And I'm curious to hear what Steve thinks, because obviously you don't need a full release and everything at company scale to implement ideas. You can do easy things already within your team There might be risks on security, data security, etc. But if IT supports this and makes sure that it's all compliant, I think it's getting easier every day. And you don't need a geek programmer anymore to optimize processes. You have many other ways to do this as a functional expert. And you now see people tending to love this and work on it, and you have people who don't. But that's how it always has been. But I think it's getting easier if the overall government framework is set up in the right way.
Steve, do you agree with that?
I do, yeah. I think it's a great point. I think the functional experts do know their business better than somebody like me would, or my team. So I think empowering those people to, within certain parameters, to be able to develop and innovate and do the kind of digital transformation work that would help the organization is important. I think, though, it's also important to make sure it's being done in a cohesive way so that you don't have this, a bunch of people across the organization working across purposes. So there is a kind of a middle ground that you do need to find between encouraging this sort of innovation, but also then making sure that we're all moving in the same direction and all trying to achieve the value or the objective that your organization set for itself.
Diana, is it possible to innovate with simply a department by department approach?
I'm really glad you asked this question about the department, because we have spoken about the importance of leadership and the C-suite, but at that departmental level, that's where a lot of the day-to-day implementation work is getting done. And what I've actually seen in my research is that inadequate cross-departmental communication is the number 3 barrier to digital transformation success. So, number 1 and 2 are what you would probably expect: legacy system dependency and security concerns. They tend to be the 1 and 2, but that cross-departmental communication is critically important. And of the 6 industries we looked at, for consumer, government, and tech companies, it's even more of a challenge. And so I think to effectively address that mid-level silo issue, organizations can be looking at how they're setting up their agile pods to have more sharing of innovation information across pods, across those business units, and really thinking about their internal platform and data strategies so that those learnings are being shared across those business silos. So breaking silos, I think, is the number 1 thing I would say to address some of the challenges that organizations say that they're facing at that departmental level.
And it's not only silos. You can see that we are a huge organization, 460,000 people, and obviously there's innovation all over the planet. But the trick in the end is that we have transparency on who's doing what. Because why should a team develop a new version of a chatbot, a voice-based chatbot for call centers in the UK when it has already been done in Australia? So management teams and organizations need to make sure that there is all these bottom-up ideas. They are at least made transparent to the overall organization so that others can reuse what has been done. And that's, Steve, why I like what you said. Like, within certain frameworks and boundaries, this needs to happen, and someone needs to set these boundaries, make sure that there's a proper portfolio management, that everyone knows what's happening. There will still be endless redundancies, but at least much less compared to not knowing who's doing what.
Yeah, if I could just jump in on that, Kevin, because I totally agree. And that is one of the issues that we do see, certainly in the government of Canada. And now just take AI as a specific example. Tim, you made a great point. It doesn't make sense for us to develop a chatbot if, even within, put aside other countries, another department has done it. And so the approach that we're taking is that it's better to build and share rather than everybody build. And so if we've built a chatbot, we have been sharing that out with other departments and said with all the code and all the documentation and everything that they need to put it into place in their organization, in the hopes that others will sort of reciprocate in kind. And by that way, we'll actually scale AI in a meaningful way across an organization like the Government of Canada Because if we don't do that, we're going to have is this patchwork of chatbots out there. And then you just focus on the user experience for a second. It would be much better if somebody going to any government website had the same or similar experience using a chatbot. That would be very difficult if every department built their own in their own way. And it would be very jarring for a user when they go to it to experience that. And especially given the cross, cutting nature of a lot of the services we provide, it can become a very, very awkward experience for the user. So I totally agree with the point that you just made there.
Yeah, and building in here, there's the user experience, the adoption issue. But then think about, the back end technical side of this, of you are creating more interoperable solutions as well for that enterprise scaling if you are reusing and sharing the code rather than starting over every time. So it helps with the resource strain, which we see as a major issue related to scaling generative AI pilots to more enterprise scale integrations, because you're reusing, making things more interoperable, and removing technical debt in the process.
And let's all just avoid that we repeat what happened in the early days of RPA, robotic process automation, where there were like hundreds of happy business cases, payback, 6 months, etc., but they never scaled in the early days. And the great companies, they from day one were not looking for a pilot with a great payback, but for a pilot which would build the platform for real scaling. Like a CFO once told me, look, Tim, great pilot project, I love it, 9 months payback, it's 10 FTE. Should I show you again that we have 14,000 people? It's not helping at scale. So we need to find something which is scaling, and I think that's key. And it's getting harder, as we just discussed, with all the AI work, because many people in the organization can now work and develop things many more than ever before. So the boundaries need also to be set.
We are here today with Digital Transformation Talk. We're talking with Tim Bottke, Chief Innovation Officer at Deloitte, Diana Kearns-Manolatos, Technology Transformation Research Leader at Deloitte, and Steve Rennie, Director of Data-Driven Technologies, the Data-Driven Technologies Division for the Government of Canada. And we are here talking about changing your transformation narrative from cost to value creation. And folks, in the time that we have left, I do want to touch upon our last discussion topic, and that is conveying the impacts and risks of your strategy. My big question here is about your recommendations. I want to know about your recommendations for the key process indicators that I should be considering in when I'm communicating the impacts and risk or the success of my strategy. What are the key KPIs that we should consider? Diana, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so to start on strategy, I would say Tim and I did some research together looking at the market impact that an effective digital strategy with technology investments aligned to that strategy and a strong digital change capability can have. And that's what businesses care about, is if I'm investing in technology, how is it going to move forward my business and the market? And we saw for just Fortune 500 firms, there's a $1.25 trillion market cap opportunity. So that's one big number to look at, is how is it driving forward your business growth? Process productivity is the number one, though, that organizations are using right now. But what I would say is they need to get out of that productivity first mindset and really think more holistically about the value that investments in technology bring to the organization.
Okay. Steve, what are some KPIs that you're using?
Well, I think another one to focus on is employee satisfaction. And that's a little harder to measure, but ultimately, when you're embarking on one of these transformation journeys, it's important to be able to find ways that you can measure how people are feeling about that, and then be able to adjust if you need to. And so there's lots of different ways you can do that. I think ultimately, though, it comes down to, we said earlier, communicating out why you're doing these things. And so making sure that the message is crisp and clear and understood well across across the organization that you're working in. But then checking in with folks in lots of different ways. So whether that's in groups, whether that's individually, depending on the size of your organization, you can build in technology to find ways to sort of solicit feedback from people and work on that. And then it's not just a one and done. Also, it's consistently communicating as you go. So not just we're going to start this strategy and then you kind of leave it. It's checking in, giving updates, soliciting feedback, showing people that their feedback is being taken seriously and that you are pivoting if necessary, doing all the things to make them feel that they have a stake in it and that they're being valued, and that the organization is not just sort of deciding to go ahead with the strategy regardless of how they may feel about it.
And I think.
And Tim, what are some KPIs that you might suggest that we consider and put in our communication plan about the success and impacts of our strategies?
I think like Diana and Steve, we have covered the ones I would really see as most important in all the dimensions, but I really like the last point you made. Like a CEO told me like just a couple of weeks ago in a meeting, look, we always fail in digital transformation in the element of the end-to-end journey, which we didn't take seriously. And recently, this has been people. In the early days, you had a higher risk on the platforms, then you had to learn how to transform. But today, very often, people think that you just quickly reskill based on 5 PowerPoint charts, and then the whole organization will follow. And that's clearly not the case. You cannot reskill everyone. Mm-hmm. You might lose some, but if you do not have the perfect market for highly skilled digital native new employees, you need to work with the ones you have, because very likely they even have better skills in understanding the business. They just need to be educated to use and live in the new system. And that's this education part, this training and reskilling part. And that's what Diana also meant with the change component. It's not like a nice bubble marketing chart. It's changing people by convincing them that change is the right thing to do. But in the end, just to summarize, it's all about market value for me. Like I'm like the shareholder, or at least stakeholder value in the broader sense for corporates, mm-hmm. or for the citizens in governments. That should be the ultimate KPI.
All right. We are here today with Tim Bottke, Diana Kearns-Manolatos, and Steve Rennie. Folks, it's been a great discussion today. We have reached the action item round of the program. I'm wondering if each of you could please provide us with one quick action item that our listeners and viewers can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice today. Diana, I'd like to start with you. Do you have an action item for us today?
Yeah, so my one action item is think about why your organization exists, and really lean into that with what your KPIs are, what the outcomes you're trying to achieve for the technology, so that you can really push the innovation and growth agenda forward. There's a lot of technology and a lot of opportunity out there, but it needs to be oriented against that strategic vision. And back to what we were saying with the article of the day, it goes to how are you going to be asking different and better questions about, why your organization exists and what you can be doing differently.
All right, that is Diana Kearns-Manolatos from Deloitte. Diana, thank you so much for your perspective and advice today. Steve, do you have an action item for us?
Yeah, mine would be to work on building a change champion network. It can take a number of different names, but the idea is that you want to identify and empower a group of employees across the organization to become change champions for you. So they would be your internal advocates to drive the transformation initiative. And the hope by having a group like this is that they create this groundswell of support for your initiative within the organization. And I think that employees will tend to respond better when they're hearing from their peers about why a change or a strategy is necessary, and they'll get behind it a lot more than if it came from the top down.
Excellent. All right. That is Steve Rennie. Thank you for that, Steve. And finally, Tim Bottke. Tim, do you have an action item for us?
I have a very simple one, like do strategy first and the rest should follow. And the times that strategy is no longer needed, it's quite the opposite. do the test I mentioned before. Like if the opposite of what you're doing is nonsense, likely so is what you're doing is nonsense. So think about the strategy, and then all the rest should follow.
All right. Well, it's been a great discussion. Tim, Diana, Steve, thank you so much for being with us. Your perspectives and advice were spot on. I hope we get a chance to talk again soon. So thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please join us again next week when we talk about aligning transformation to sustainability on March 26th. That's at 1600 GMT. It should be another great discussion, so please join us then. In the meantime, if you'd like to find me, you can do so on LinkedIn. I am happy to connect there, so check me out. I'm Kevin Crane. And you can check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that'll do it for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. And until next time, I am Kevin Crane. Thanks for watching.